So I was recently watching a Dom 2K video, which I do pretty much anytime he uploads, and the one I was watching was a video where he was ranking the top 10 playoff series of the 2010s. Now this video is not going to be breaking down his video in any way, and I'm perfectly fine with the opinions that he expressed in it. I just feel like one series got snubbed from that video. A series that I would argue was the best series of 2015 and the best playoff series that I ever watched as a Bulls fan. The series where LeBron James came 2 plays away from potentially ending his final streak. The playoff series I am referring to is the second round matchup between the Chicago Bulls and the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2015. Call me biased for talking about the Bulls, I don't give a fuck. I just want to talk about a series that I love and I think is really dope, and I just want to go in detail about it. If you have a problem with that, eat a dick. Anyways, the Chicago Bulls and Cleveland Cavaliers played in an intense and frankly crazy series in the second round of 2015, and I want to do a little bit of reminiscing. So let's talk about that playoff series.
Saved! Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop!
Before we talk about the series, I want to do a little bit of background on both of these teams. Starting with my Bulls. The 2015 Bulls were the best they had been since the year Derrick Rose won MVP. They won 50 games and were the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. They signed Pau Gasol in the offseason, and he had a new life in Chicago after wasting a few years in LA. He signed with the Bulls and immediately reminded the world how good he is. He was the starting center for the All-Star team that year, averaging 18, 12, and 2 at the age of 34. But he wasn't the only all-star in the Bulls, and he wasn't even the best player. After taking on a bigger offensive role with Derrick Rose out in the 2013-14 season, Jimmy Butler blossomed even more, going from an okay offensive player to a 20-point-per-game scorer over one off-season. He gave a flash of who he would become in a preseason game versus the Atlanta Hawks, putting up 29 points, 3 of those points coming from this shot.
Flips it in. Butler. Oh my goodness! It's only preseason, but I'm hyped, Neil Funk. Jimmy G buckets, gets buckets.
God, I missed that. Anyways, on top of the emergence of Jimmy Butler, Derrick Rose had his best year since 2012. He averaged 18 points and 5 assists, admittingly shooting poorly from the field, but he played 51 games after putting in only 10 in 2 years, and he had an injury that fucked up his vision for the first a month or so you can give him a bit of a pass. Outside of the core 3, Aaron Brooks and Taj Gibson were great off of the bench. Mike Dunleavy was a sharpshooter who shot 40% from 3 on 4 attempts a game, and Joakim Noah was still a phenomenal defensive player, rebounder, and great passer, averaging nearly 5 assists per game, which I think is something people either A, forget about, or B, didn't even know that Noah was that good at. Now, as for the Cleveland Cavaliers, this was the first year of the Big 3 Cavs: Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, and obviously the best player in the world, LeBron James. Kyrie averaged 22 and 5 on great efficiency. Kevin Love ended up being the worst of LeBron's Big 3 stars, averaging 16 and 10 on 43% shooting as a big man, and obviously, LeBron James was LeBron James. I don't think I have to go into more detail than that. As for key role players, Timofey Mozgov was really good for this year and pretty much this year only. Tristan Thompson averaged 8 and 8 off of the bench. J.R. Smith shot 40% from 3 on 7 attempts per game, making him one of the best shooters in the league that year. And Iman Shumpert was a good defender off of the bench. This team won 53 games and they were the 2nd seed in the East, winning just 2 more games than the Bulls, but having the best player in the world and probably even the 2nd best player in the series, the Cavs were heavily favored when they matched up. But these teams did not match up on equal terms. An evil, overgrown yoga instructor named Kelly Olynyk pulled Kevin Love's arm out of socket, resulting in him not playing for the rest of the playoffs, having to be replaced by Tristan Thompson. Now, Love might have had a down year, but he could hit a 3-point shot. Thompson could not hit anything outside of 5 feet. So when they matched up against the Bulls and they had a 6'11 shot blocker in Joakim Noah and a 7-foot power forward in Pau Gasol who could also block shots, averaging 2 a game that season, the Bulls were able to bring a lot of size into the paint without any kind of consequence from a shooting big man, making it harder for LeBron and Kyrie Irving to get inside of the paint and create offense. And with lockdown defender Jimmy Butler guarding LeBron James, it gave the Bulls a significant defensive advantage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In the first round, the Cavs matched up against the Celtics, obviously, and despite losing Kevin Love, they beat them easily in 4 games. And as for the Bulls, they played in a series that really went longer than it should have. The Bulls won the first 3 games versus the Milwaukee Bucks, and it seemed like the Bulls had Game 4 being up 3-0, but Jared Bayless hit a game-winning layup. And in Game 5, the Bucks won by 6. I remember being legitimately afraid that my Bulls would be the first team ever to blow a 3-0 lead in the playoffs. But luckily, the Bulls absolutely stepped on the dicks of the Milwaukee Bucks. Sorry, that might have been a little graphic, even for me, but it's kinda true. The Bulls beat them in Game 6 by 54. And Giannis also hilariously tackled Mike Dunleavy in that game, something that will be in my memory until the day that I die. So with that being said, the series begins. Game 1. This was a really defensive game. Jimmy Butler, Derrick Rose, LeBron James, and Kyrie Irving all shot poorly from the field. Pau Gasol was really the only one with an efficient game, shooting 62% from the field with 20 and 10, and the Bulls ended up winning this game, winning 99-92. Next game, the Bulls once again shot poorly, but the Cavaliers did not, so they won by 15. The first 2 games of this series were not all too exciting. Game 1 was close, but not that interesting, and Game 2 was obviously a blowout. But where this series gets really good is Game 3. Once again, this ended up being a defensive game. LeBron shot 32%, Kyrie Irving shot an abysmal 3 for 13, Jimmy Butler shot 41%, Derrick Rose 38%, and Pau Gasol 42%. Neither team would score 100 points. With 2 minutes and 24 seconds left in the game, JR hit a 3-pointer, which would be the only field goal until the last 35 seconds. Both teams shot a few free throws, and then Jimmy Butler hit this pivot layup under the basket. Could potentially have been a travel, but we don't need to talk about that. And the Bulls go up by 3, but then J.R. Smith hits a 3 that I remember seeing come from a mile away with 10 seconds remaining. After the Cavs disrupted the inbound play, the Bulls were left with 3 seconds on the clock. The Bulls reset, Mike Dunleavy was the inbounder, and this happened.
Finds Rose. Rose trying to get open, fires away.
Derrick Rose banks in a crazy fadeaway 3 over Tristan Thompson at the buzzer, giving him 30 points and creating a fantastic NBA meme. With that shot, this series just got real. The Bulls are now up 2-1 heading into Chicago for Game 4. The Bulls have a chance to go up 3-1 if they can get a win on their home court. So heading into Game 4, there was a lot of pressure on the Cavaliers, and as with any team with LeBron on it, there was a lot of pressure on LeBron. For the series at this point, LeBron averaged his typical 26 points per game, but he shot 39% from the field and averaged 4.5 turnovers, having a game with 7 turnovers. Jimmy Butler was playing phenomenal defense on LeBron, and even though a lot of this stuff wasn't his fault, like Kyrie Irving also playing poorly, and Kevin Love no longer being there to space the floor, he was still the leader of the team and still LeBron James, so he was catching some heat. So in Game 4, the Cavs were almost the underdogs now, and Game 4 ended up being very controversial. So much so that I had a video specifically dedicated to this series in the past over a specific thing that happened in Game 4. But once again, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Game 4 was the lowest scoring game of the series and actually the second lowest scoring game of the entire 2015 playoffs, with both teams combining for just 170 points. And LeBron didn't exactly respond statistically in this game, shooting just 10 for 30. Kyrie Irving shot just 2 for 10. I don't know what was up with him in this series. I think I remember him being injured, but I don't have anything to back that up. I can't remember for sure if that's true. Anyways, Derrick Rose hits a 3, giving the Bulls a 3-point lead with 2 minutes left, followed by a shot by LeBron James and a couple of free throws that resulted in the Cavs being up 5, with 40 seconds left. Bulls call timeout, and then out of that timeout, Jimmy Butler hits a step-back 3 over Tristan Thompson, 84-82 Cavs. Tristan Thompson seems to have a knack for having big shots hit over him. The Cavs inbound to LeBron, who accidentally elbows Mike Dunleavy in the face, causing an offensive foul. Derrick Rose crosses over Iman Shumpert and finishes a layup over LeBron James. Then, my most painful memory as a Bulls fan. The Bulls have tied the game. There is 10 seconds remaining, and the Cleveland Cavaliers have 0 timeouts. And yet, David Blatt attempts to get a timeout with a lot of refs looking at him. I don't want to dive into this too much because I know missed calls happen, and because I already have an entire video dedicated to this, I don't want to be salty about it. But a timeout call when you don't have one results in a free throw and possession for the opposing team. If this was called, the Bulls would have had a free throw and ball, and it most likely results in them going up 3-1 on the Cavs. This was very controversial, but missed calls happen all the time, and they define series all the time. It is what it is. I'll just leave this topic of discussion between me and my therapist. But anyways, LeBron drives inside, gets fouled by Joakim Noah, but it is not called and it goes out of bounds. But there was a debate as to whether or not the ball was actually out on the Bulls, so the refs spent some time looking at the play, which essentially gave the Cavaliers the timeout that they were asking for. I'm not gonna get salty about it. Then in another play that probably led to David Blatt being fired, Blatt drew up a play where LeBron was the inbounder to J.R. Smith, who had been hot all series, but LeBron said fuck that noise and basically took over and set up the play for him to take the final shot with 1.8 seconds left. And this happened.
James for the win. It's gone. LeBron James at the buzzer stuns the Chicago Bulls, and the series is tied at 2 games apiece.
LeBron hits a fading long 2 over good defense by Jimmy Butler, and the series is tied up at 2 apiece. LeBron saves the series and the season with 1 shot. Shady circumstances or no, it was an impressive shot, and even though LeBron shot poorly for the game, he still silenced his haters with that game winner. So in games 3 and 4, we have 2 tough, grindy defensive games where every bucket at the end of a game feels like a relief, and at the end of both of those games we have 2 fairly tough game winners and 1 great celebration. No shade to LeBron, it wasn't even really his fault, but he got like clothesline hugged on his celebration, which just looked awkward as fuck, and it wasn't memeable at all, unlike Derrick Rose's, which is the only bit of solace that I can take from that. These 2 games are why the series is great to me. I personally like games where defense is so suffocating on both ends that every bucket feels like a relief to you, and when your opponent scores, it feels like the end of the world. It's sort of like the reverse all-star game where scoring becomes so common and so easy that it takes away all the impact of actually doing it. And ending those 2 games with 2 crazy game winners was some shit out of a storybook. And I also think the what if of it is pretty fun. If the Cavs lose game 4 and go down 3-1, they more than likely lose the series. Not that LeBron hasn't come back from 3-1 before, but what happens to the Cavs if they lose in their first year? Maybe they don't look all that different and just blame losing on the loss of Kevin Love, but Kyrie played horrible in that series. He averaged 17 on 40% shooting with only 3 assists. Maybe it results in him getting traded. David Blatt fucking up in this series is one of the main reasons that he ended up getting fired, so who knows? And I think the Bulls make the finals in 2015 if they pass the Cavs, but they would lose to the Warriors. But it would have definitely meant that this team stays together for more than 1 year after this, and Tom Thibodeau doesn't get fired in the offseason. Whether that's for better or for worse. Probably worse, but still. Now, the reason I went straight from Game 4 to that is there's not a whole lot to say afterwards. Game 5 was similar to Game 1, close but not particularly exciting. The Cavs won by 5. LeBron had the first good shooting game of the series, putting up 38 on 58% shooting, and in Game 6, the Bulls were demoralized and they shot abysmally, putting up 73 points on 37% shooting as a team. After being screwed, at least in their minds, as well as mine, out of a 3-1 lead, suddenly finding themselves down 3-2 was really demoralizing. So that was the series. 2 good games, 2 great ones, and a blowout at the end. Now, as for why I feel this series is one of the best of the 2010s, it had 2 crazy game winners, it was a tough, grindy defensive series, and it has a big what if in it. Another reason for me is personal, and that reason is just simply Derrick Rose. This was the only time as a Bulls fan that, for me personally, that Rose looked like a real star. I became a fan of the NBA and the Bulls in the season after Derrick Rose tore his ACL, which meant I never really got to see him as a star. But in this series, he averaged 22 points and 6.5 assists. And he legitimately looked like a star again. I'm not just talking about his game winner. He was outplaying a point guard at the time that was way better in Kyrie Irving. So that's why I feel the Bulls versus Cavs matchup in 2015 was one of the most underrated playoff series of the 2010s. Let me know what your favorite series of the 2010s was in the comments, I guess. I gotta start working on a 50k sub special, so expect that soon whenever I hit it. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.